Hello and welcome to the Mobile GameDev Playbook. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. This is a podcast all about what makes a great mobile game, what is and isn't working for mobile game designers, and all of the latest trends. I'm your host Jon Jordan, and in today's episode we are taking a deep dive into what's been going on with FunPlus's State of Survival. So that's going to be really exciting, and we have two experts, I guess from both sides, from either side of the equation. Joining us from GameRefinery by Liftoff, we have Milka Paunonen. How's it going, Milka?
Hey, how's it going?
First time on the podcast, very exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me. Yeah.
Good. And
Thanks for having me.
So you're coming as our 4X sort of expert, or you do various other things as well that will sort of come into the podcast later on. But you're our sort of 4X expert. That's a difficult thing to say. So thanks for coming on. And we have Bob Slinn, who is our FunPlus expert, I guess, as the VP of Business Development. How's it going, Bob?
Good, very good. Great to be here, and excited to chat about our games and 4X.
Good. So before we sort of dive straight into the game, should we do a bit of background? Bob, tell us what's been going on. You know, who is FunPlus? What have they been doing over the years? Where did they get to the situation of making State of Survival?
FunPlus has been around for a little bit over 10 years now. So it started in 2010. Two founders were based in California. Decided they would basically build a gaming business, initially focused on Facebook games. And they had real success over the first couple of years. But around 2016, they decided to sell that original studio, focused on casual gaming, and then kind of went back to the drawing board and really decided to focus on mobile and initially strategy. So that's sort of the super high level story. But what's interesting is, the company has grown dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. So since they started in mobile, the first game was Kings of Avalon, 4X strategy game, just celebrated its 6th anniversary. Then they launched Guns of Glory in quick succession, and then just coming up on 3 years ago, they launched State of Survival, which is really where the big, I guess I'd say the really big increase happened, and the really big shift in trajectory. So, all our 4X strategy games, the company's continued to evolve. We have about 2,000 people globally now, and then we have a number of people in Switzerland, which is where our global headquarters are, including me. We have teams all over Europe. We have a studio in Stockholm. We have people in Barcelona. We have the majority of people in Asia, so we have a number of development studios in China, which is where all the 4X games are made. And really, the ongoing ambition is to continue to expand across multiple genres. So we've just launched a game called Call of Antia, which is a puzzle RPG game, which is our first move beyond 4X. We have had some casual games that we're testing. So the idea really is to continue to expand and learn, and then also we're starting to look at expanding across platform. We have a team that was acquired in 2021 who are in Irvine, California, who are a lot of ex-Blizzard people who are really focusing on thinking about kind of the next generation of IP, because that's one of the the long-term vision of FunPlus is really thinking about IP within games, but really this vision that the next generation of great IP will come from games. So that's where they're really focusing longer term on how we think about that long-term objective while we continue to focus on growing the mobile business.
It shows the incredible growth that we've had from mobile. I think actually came across FunPlus back when they were making, before they were probably called FunPlus, when they were making some of the casual stuff. And it was sort of interesting to see that sort of transition, or selling off that bit and then going into quite a heavy-duty sort of 4X. To me at that time, it didn't seem very, very clear that the two things were well related, but so much I know. Have hundreds of millions of downloads down the line. Okay, good. So Milka, let's talk a bit about sort of 4X, and we've had, I guess, 7 or 8 years now of innovation in the 4X sort of mobile space. So where do you think that State of Survival, where does that fit within sort of the 4X free-to-play mobile genre, and I guess in particular, why has it had such success? What are the features that make it stand out?
Yeah, well, I think State of Survival actually fits quite well for the 4X space at the moment, because I think the increased focus on characters being the main source of power progression has been a huge trend lately. So games are bringing more characters which can be collected, developed, and used on various missions. And this also opens up various monetization possibilities through gachas and direct purchases to support this character collecting and upgrading. Also, increased variety of upgrading methods for characters has been huge possibility for these 4X games when they are evolved to this direction. Also, something that's I've been noticing lately has been like the character building through story, dialogue, and theme is also used as means for bringing more depth to the game. So that is something State of Survival does also a lot, and that is an interesting or important point in their success, I think. Also, something I think hybridization is also a huge part, or it's a huge trend at the moment. So most of the new games entering top 200 have been utilizing these different hybrid mechanics. Some really innovative approaches like the merge mechanics, for example, or match 3 puzzle mechanics even we have been seen in 4X games lately. So some really surprising combinations. And I think it's a good way for games to really differentiate themselves from their competition. And State of Survival has also been differentiating themselves with their RPG kind of like this hybrid mechanics that they have implemented. So I think all in all, 4X it is getting much needed, extra layers to the gameplay, which makes, to me as a player also, it makes 4X on mobile right now really interesting and more fun even than before.
I think it's definitely the case. The first wave of 4X games were incredibly abstract and incredibly deep. That was sort of the thing that sort of drove these very strong communities around them. But there was very little sort of obvious engagement. You had to sort of dive in deep and sort of just keep swimming down until you found sort of where's my metaphor going here? But you had to work quite hard to get into the game. Once you got into the game, then they were very sticky, which is why they were very successful. But I think, I remember playing some of those early ones. Just like, one, I'm no idea what I'm doing here. Two, there's just like millions of materials that I'm collecting everywhere to level things up, and it was just like whole very confusing.
Yeah, it has made the games maybe a little bit more accessible also. So maybe that's the reason why 4X is kind of a rising genre, I think, lately also.
And also, you mentioned hybridization. You've been listening to our previous podcast where we mention it constantly, all the time. That is this sort of fascinating thing where now many mobile games, no matter what they are, sort of seen as in terms of genre, they can have sort of many different sort of genres within them. They're becoming almost like meta platforms for gaming. But we'll leave that one. If you're interested, go back and listen to some of our previous podcasts where we spend a lot of time on that. Anyway, so let's focus on State of Survival. So in particular the characters is interesting, and we've noticed, or in the GameRefinery recent awards, State of Survival won 2 for biggest evolver and best use of IP in a collaboration event. So we'll maybe, Bob, talk about the best use of IP in a collaboration event, because this is something that was very striking. And this is you've had a very successful IP event with The Walking Dead. So can you talk a little bit about, obviously they're both zombie games, we should point out. I guess that's the obvious starting point. And they're both zombie IPs. But
there's a natural connection there for sure.
But equally, there's a lot of Walking Dead games out there as well. So there is this interesting idea that, maybe for The Walking Dead, doing a big collaboration with another zombie game. Obviously, it has been sort of successful, certainly for you guys. But there is an idea of sort of, are you cannibalising existing games or existing IP holders? So can you talk a little bit about, how you think that sort of area of making sure you're not sort of annoying existing IP holders by doing these other things, and obviously how it played out for State of Survival?
Oh, for sure. And I think the point Milka made about the importance of the characters and the heroes in our case is central to the reason we started doing these IP collaborations, because really, I think that was the big innovation. State of Survival, the 2 parts were, one, thinking about the theme and thinking of the depth of story around, this post-apocalyptic zombie land, and really how that might resonate. And as we were building the game, we really started to see that players did appreciate that, and you could build a really incredible, deep story. And then you attach that to the heroes, and people could really start to build affinity for the heroes, and there's a whole process of unlocking the heroes and making them stronger, like classic RPG mechanics. But that meant that people had this, in addition to building their base and all the kind of classic 4X stuff, they had this whole other narrative and a whole other way to interact with the game, which I think Milka's point was made it more accessible. But when it came to talking about actual IP and collaborations, what we did is we asked our players. We do a lot of things where we, not surprisingly, with these types of games, in any type of game, you want to talk to the community and talk to the players. And so we actually did a number of surveys around, what are their IP, what are their, not necessarily games, just what are their IP that they find interesting. And so not surprisingly, The Walking Dead was, top of the list. So we went, slightly before my time, but went out and talked to AMC and figured out that, again, there's this natural affinity because of the worlds that, and the two environments that the TV program and all the other offshoots of the Walking Dead IP live in, and our game. So they were great to work with and quite happy to collaborate. So the idea was we would create both a hero, a Daryl Dixon hero, who would live in the game, and again, still lives in the game. If you'd unlocked him during the 6-month integration, you can have him as one of your characters. So there's this, again, this strong RPG element and this continuity, and he fit perfectly into the lore and the storyline of State of Survival. And the story continues to evolve, and it's again all about trying to find a cure to stop the zombies, and you're building your base and you're building these alliances. So it was a pretty natural fit. But what we saw, which was interesting, is people really appreciated the connection, partly because it made sense and it was a natural thing, but we also built out a storyline around his arrival, how he was going to help, how he's going to try to be a new hero to try to take on the zombies. And I think what we also do for all of these different integrations, and a core part of the game, is we'll have these events, which are these multifaceted activities, again, live ops sort of thing, where part of it is through the community interactions, part of it is through kind of traditional unlocking and PvE battles. Then you basically, over time, you have to work to unlock the character. So when we talk about having a 6-month promotion, there was people could come into the games at various times, and it would take a while to actually unlock Daryl Dixon. And we really saw very, very positive response from the community. I think they appreciated it. It fit naturally, and then we did a bunch of marketing activities around that, which is another, from a business standpoint, part of the rationale for this is to help expand the audience. So we partnered with the ultimate rights holder. So there wasn't really, I think the thought was more around these two universes and how they could fit together, rather than thinking about the pre-existing games, which are serving different audiences.
Why the 6 months? Because I think we were previously discussing that maybe that was the longest collaboration we'd ever seen in a game. It just seemed like that. It's part of the point of collaborations is you have them limited edition. You sort of try and force everyone in there and get it sort of done quickly. So 6 months seems a bit counterproductive. Or
being super transparent, this was the first one we did. So it's been a learning curve for us. And I think that's one of the things that FunPlus, and from the beginning, had always built their own IP and had always focused on finding super talented producers, having them build teams around them, and build these amazing games. So this was the first time we'd actually collaborated with someone. So I think partly it was an experiment. I think partly just because of the way these things work and the fact that it can take a while to unlock the character, because again, depending on your intensity of play, depending on if you're spending in the game or not, it can take a while to actually unlock the character. To be fair, I think what we did, as you'd expect, there was a big spike in engagement and activity early on, and then we had some marketing beats throughout the 6 months. But I think, did it need to be 6 months in retrospect? Maybe not. But I think, overall, I think the way the game works, once you unlock the character, you're engaging with Daryl Dixon effectively forever, right? So it's the one we did more recently with the Joker was shorter. It was about 3 months, and I think we saw a similar impact and similar engagement from the community. So I think, I don't know that we'd need to do 6 months next time around.
It's sort of interesting, as you say, you did one with the Joker, which is clearly nothing to do with zombies. So there's the flexibility of the envelope, of the IP envelope, in which you can, obviously, again, there's probably elasticity is it could be broken, and sort of you can imagine those sort of things going horribly sort of wrong. But the Joker's actually sort of quite interesting, because he's that sort of chaotic sort of figure, although not specifically zombies. So and he was actually a playable character that the players would use against the zombies, wasn't he?
And that was, again, when I first joined, we were already talking about integrating the Joker, and the process was underway. And again, the immediate reaction is, well, the Joker's not a zombie. He's not in a post-apocalyptic world. On the other hand, he is this agent of chaos, as you say, and he, certainly, there's a rich lore around all the different things he's done, and he's quite a mischievous character. So, what was impressive to me coming from the outside initially, because I arrived just as that was about to go live, was the games team had built this very involved storyline, a whole secondary storyline around how the Joker would appear in the game, why it made sense, why people should engage. And the initial premise was, is he good or bad? Because obviously the Joker historically is very much on the darker side of the spectrum. So he was initially positioned as kind of a friend, and he was there to do good and help people find a cure. And he partnered closely with the doctor, who is one of the kind of main parts of the story, who was always trying to find a cure to what's infected the zombie. So there was this, again, throughout the 3 months, there was this arc where as you went through the event and as you went through the different activities, it gradually became clear, actually, he maybe wasn't so good after all, spoiler alert. But it worked very, very well. And it was one of these things where, because the story is so deep, and because the team spent a lot of time thinking about the story and why it would make sense for him to appear, it ended up working great. And the other interesting thing is, by working with Warner Brothers and DC Comics, who own the IP, they actually, because we partnered with the comic book character, and there's a number of different iterations, we actually had a reasonable amount of latitude in creating our own Joker. So we had, our artists created a version of the Joker who would fit within the game, and obviously subject to approval and everything. But that also made it, I think, feel more natural, because the art style and everything else corresponded to the rest of the game.
And just for people who haven't played the game, it is very interesting, I think, from the get-go, playing through the initial sort of tutorial, how. And often you have sort of story in there because that's what gets people going, but it's sort of it's sort of very humorous sort of storyline. And so another thing, as I said, on the State of Emergency won an award for, was the biggest devolver, and that was particularly for a localized version of the Japanese market. So Milka, I mean, you're an expert on the Japanese market in general, as well as being sort of 4X. So are 4X games generally big in Japan? And the Japanese market is very big for mobile games, but tends to be sort of more RPG focused, doesn't it?
Yeah, the market in general is very RPG focused, for sure. But there are many 4X titles that are successful in Japan also. What was actually for State of Survival, I mean, I have been following the Japanese market for a while, so one of the keys to succeed in the market is to offer more personal and familiar content to the local audience. And I think State of Survival has done a good job at just they in that game, like, emphasizing a little bit of the Japanese characters or the cultural elements in the market. I feel has been good way to boost its success in Japan, especially. Yeah,
just to add on that, I think obviously Japan is an enormous gaming market and a hugely competitive and quite a unique market. So interestingly, State of Survival, our biggest markets have tended to be in the West, so North America, Western Europe, even though the development team is in China. So as we started to look at how we could gradually expand and localize the game, we've over time added more languages, but Japan again requires a different level of localization and adaptation. So to make a point, we added different heroes, we created a different entry point, we partnered with different Japanese celebrities to create a whole marketing campaign. And to be fair, it's a hard market, right? And we're still continuing to learn and still continue to iterate on the game. But that's again part of the approach, is really as the game continues to scale and mature, coming up to its third anniversary, really thinking about how do we adapt the experience for the different markets, and where can we find the right heroes, where can we find the right partnerships.
I guess The Walking Dead probably is fairly universal, but there would be things that would work really well in the Japanese market that would clearly not make sense anywhere else. So, do you end up sort of with a separate version of the game? Or?
I think the core game experience and the alliances and really the collaboration of the community and the base building, all that can be pretty consistent. I think to make this point, I think it's an element of really thinking about the visual treatments. Do you have heroes that resonate, and then where you can find the right local partnerships. And again, it's an ongoing process because really the reason the game has worked as well as it had is partly the storyline continues to evolve and there's an interest there, partly you're unlocking heroes. So again, localization is important. And then thirdly, the community is critical, and like all 4X games, once you get to a certain point, in our case you join an alliance, and that becomes this incredibly social supportive entity. And I think that's one of the kind of fun things about State of Survival is because the theme is very bleak and you're trying to save the world, and yet you have this very strong group of friends. And I've been in multiple alliances because occasionally I get kicked out if I'm not active enough because the bar is pretty high, and the friendships are amazing. But we've also done a lot to try to make it easy for people with translation tools and all these things. So yeah, I think that's it's this balance of trying to make sure we have scalable tools, but also make sure we can really support communities locally.
Always the problem with alliances, you go on holiday and then that's it.
Exactly.
Do these people never go on holiday?
I'm continually amazed that you get these 2 a.m. messages for some sort of incredibly important battle and contribution, and it's amazing. I mean, it really is the strength of the communities, and the dedication is remarkable.
But I wonder if that's going back to the sort of our initial talk about sort of hybridization. Is the sort of secret source of a State of Survival is that there is, I think, compared to like the classic sort of 4X game, there is quite a lot for a solo player just to sort of enjoy just farming the stuff and building out that and getting your heroes and doing those sort of things. And 4X games have typically tried to get people into alliances very, very quickly, because that's sort of, if they're going to stick, that's where they're going to stick. Whereas it seems to me, in my limited experience of it, State of Survival sort of extends that sort of, let's keep them in the game, let's keep them enjoying it and sort of getting in, retained in there, and then, the alliance stuff is more likely to stick them when you get in there. I mean, how where do you see alliances in that sort of funnel? If funnel is the right word.
No. So it's a great question, and I do think, as someone who, when I came to the game, I was much more personally much happier to kind of progress and unlock my heroes, and there's a whole PvE pathway, and you can progress through, and your heroes can get gradually stronger, and there's all these nice little animations. So you can keep yourself entertained for quite a long time. I do think, at its core, the alliance mechanic and the community is what keeps people around for the long term. It still remains the same, just because it's such a powerful thing. Once you join the alliance and you start competing against other alliances and raids, and it really is compelling. But again, you can have, I think it's almost more useful and more interesting as a complement to that when there's downtime, because once you get to a certain level and you're upgrading your base, it takes a very long time. So the ability to upgrade your heroes and interact with your heroes in a different way, I think, fills in time or gives you another path to stay engaged in the game.
Milka, how do you see sort of trends around sort of alliances and single player stuff within 4X games? Is State of Survival, I guess everyone's copying it now. There's one successful game, everyone's like, oh, I'll have a bit of that. Are we seeing sort of strong trends going on generally across 4X games?
I think it's a huge trend also. Just like mentioned, having these options of playing, having this option to play single player modes, or progressing that way is also important, because not everyone can be. For example, for me, when I play as a free-to-play player, the progress for me in general is a lot slower than many of the strongest people in the alliance. So it is a way for me to feel like I'm making meaningful progress on my own, while I'm also trying my best in the alliance activities also.
And I guess sort of one thing we've not spoken about at all is monetization. Obviously, the success of a game is sort of monetization is pretty important to that. So obviously, Bob, probably certain things you can and can't say, but does the effect of sort of adding that sort of longer sort of single player thing, is that important for monetization, or with any 4X game, does really the core of monetization is going to get people into alliances and get them doing these big alliance wars and these big sort of special events where the alliances really are really going for it because the rewards are so great?
I think it definitely does. I think it's another path, because people really do like the heroes, engage with the heroes, and the heroes become part of the alliance experience, because you'll have your strongest heroes are representing you in battle. And so I think it does present another avenue where people, and it becomes again quite hard to level up your hero, and your hero has attributes and skills. So again, it's like an RPG model where there's different things you need to try to, and different elements and shards you need to acquire over time. So absolutely. And then you have base building, and then you have troops. Of course, you need to acquire more troops. You lose your troops in battle. So yeah, it's definitely another element of monetization that's proven successful.
You might correct me if I'm wrong. With the characters as well, you sort of have to. You can't just get the the best characters. You sort of have to level up in terms of certain generations of characters. Is that right as well?
Yeah, exactly. There's different groupings, and you have to progress with your base has to get to a certain level, and each time you get to another level, then you also have to up level your hero building, which is then allows you to have your heroes within the building progress. So everything is interconnected. I mean, again, from an engagement standpoint, it's great because there are all these different vectors in between the big battles and the big excitement. You're always thinking, okay, well, have I got my heroes to this level? Have I got this happening? Am I doing my PvE way, which is another way to, again, unlock assets. So it is definitely a sort of multifaceted experience. I find myself, losing way more time than I would care to admit when I think, it's always I'm just going in to harvest a few things, and then, 45 minutes later you're still there, and it's quite compelling.
But obviously there's many things you're not going to talk about, but I wonder sort of in general if you can talk about, State of Survival sort of 3 years anniversary coming up. Where do games like that go? Do you sort of end up on a treadmill of more characters, always exciting, more sort of events for the alliances, always exciting? Is that the sort of trajectory now that it goes on? Because now clearly we have mobile games that have been successful for 10 years. So how far do you look into the sort of future of these sort of games that I'm sure State of Survival will last for 10 years as well? But
it's an interesting one because, again, you have these players who are incredibly engaged, who spend a lot of time with their alliances. So I do think, just inherently the nature of the game and the social fabric of the game means that there isn't specifically a shelf life. If you're engaged and your alliance is strong and you're wanting to battle, that will continue to be interesting and relevant. I think again, like all games of a certain maturity, live ops, very important. And I think particularly the way this game works, there's a high frequency of these different events. I think what we're trying to do now is really think, we've been doing things for the community for a while, as in sort of more traditional Discord, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else, and we have very active communities on the social platforms. But what we're also doing is really thinking about how we can connect with that community in different ways. So we just did an event in Berlin recently where we had effectively a number of our most engaged players came to effectively a physical event, and it was quite fun. We had actors dressed up as zombies and prizes and interacting with different people from the community and our team. So that was super fun. It was in this abandoned, some sort of, I don't even know what it was, like a radar station or something. It really did look post-apocalyptic. So we're trying to, again, be creative around how we can engage with our players, beyond I'd say the kind of normal channels. So I think that's part of what we're trying to do. If you look at King of Avalon, which was the first game we launched, which is 6 years old and still going strong, we've actually just done a big release, which is effectively a whole new theme around the way the game looks and the way the game plays, called Frost and Flame. So it's all kind of Arthur era Knights and Dragons, but now there's this whole new set of lore and history and characters to experience. So that's again, I think it's the first time we've done something like that. So not to say that's imminent for State of Survival, but there are different ways to continue to keep the experience fresh and exciting.
In an apocalyptic world, you have quite a lot of variation, for, quite a lot of opportunity to do wacky things. It's like the rules of physics are not necessarily.
That's pretty fun. The heroes can continue to get stranger, and I think we're going to continue to look at the right types of partnerships and bringing the right characters, even though there is, again, this sort of strong tradition of really the writers and the producers coming up with their own storylines and their own character development. Good.
Oh, excellent. That was brilliant, really. Yeah, very exciting. People who haven't been playing State of Survival, obviously now is the time to download it and see what's been going on there. Thanks very much for your time, Bob. That was really fascinating.
Oh, thank you, John. That was great. Great chatting with you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Milka, for coming on and giving us your expert opinion.
Thank you.
I hope you'll come back. Hope we weren't too terrifying. Good. And thank you for you listeners and watchers, depending on how you consume the podcast. Please subscribe by your podcast provider of choice, and come back next time. We are talking to sort of the people who are building out this fascinating mobile games industry. Now the biggest part of the entire games industry, and now we see sort of building out these very long-term products that are evolving in very sort of fascinating ways. And if you subscribe to the podcast, you'll find out what's coming next. So see you next time. Thanks for listening.